Victoria Hayes entered the world draped in privilege. She was the sole heiress to the Hayes family fortune, daughter of Charles Hayes, a ruthless real estate mogul whose empire loomed over the city skyline, and Evelyn Hayes, a woman consumed by status and appearances. From her earliest memories, Victoria's life was not her own. It was a performance, a carefully choreographed ballet of manners, posture, and presentation. Private schools, equestrian lessons, designer dresses, debutante balls. Every detail of her childhood was polished to gleaming perfection, not for her, but for the family name. To the outside world, she was untouchable, the perfect daughter of a perfect dynasty. But behind those ornate iron gates and sweeping chandeliers, Victoria's home life was suffocating. Charles Hayes was relentless. Success was the only currency he valued, and love was conditional. Every grade, every accolade, every public smile was weighed and measured against the Hayes legacy. Evelyn Hayes was no kinder. Her obsession with appearances left no room for warmth. Sit up straight, Victoria. Fix your smile. Don't embarrass us. What the world saw was a girl blessed with everything. What Victoria felt was a girl starved of affection. And so, she learned early. If she wanted to be loved, she had to be flawless. But perfection is a cage, and the child inside that cage grows restless. By the time Victoria reached adolescence, the cracks had already begun to form. Behind her poised smile was a gnawing hunger for validation, a desperate craving for something, anything, that would make her feel whole. Academics became her first escape. In books, she found freedom. In history, in art, in stories preserved forever on canvas, she discovered beauty that didn't vanish the moment she fell short. Her intelligence was undeniable, her ambition fierce. And when she earned admission to an Ivy League university, it seemed like proof that all the pain, all the pressure, had forged her into something remarkable. But what good is a polished diamond if it's cracking inside? At university, Victoria excelled on paper. Professors praised her. She dazzled at galas. Yet socially, she floundered. For the first time, she was surrounded not by people impressed with her wealth, but by peers who had their own brilliance, their own charisma. The mask she wore at home didn't fit so easily here. And inside, she battled a storm. Who was she, without the Hayes name? Who was she, if she wasn't perfect? The pressure to be everything at once, the dutiful daughter, the flawless student, the charming socialite, collided with a darker urge, the craving for excitement, for risk, for the rush of being truly wanted. And that craving bled into her relationships. Her romances were passionate, intoxicating, but never lasting. She chased men who made her heart race, who gave her the thrill of danger, the drama she secretly craved. Stability felt suffocating. Predictability felt like chains. Again and again, she burned bridges in her search for something that would finally silence the voice in her head whispering, "You're not enough." Victoria Hayes became a paradox. To the world, she was confident, magnetic, dazzling. But when the makeup came off and the spotlight dimmed, she was fragile, terrified, and alone. She wanted love desperately. Yet every time love came close, she sabotaged it, replacing it with fire that burned out just as quickly as it began. And then, she met Daniel Mercer. He was unlike anyone she had known. Quiet, steady, unshaken by her theatrics. A man who listened more than he spoke. A man whose confidence was not loud or flashy, but rooted in something deeper, integrity. Where others saw the flawless surface she projected, Daniel saw through it. He noticed the sadness behind her smile, the vulnerability behind her eyes, the cracks in the mask she had worn all her life. And for the first time, Victoria wondered, could this be it? Could this be the man who saves me? To Daniel, she was beautiful and brilliant, but it was her hidden fragility that captured his heart. To Victoria, Daniel represented safety, the anchor she had never known, the love she had always craved. She clung to him like a lifeline, convincing herself that he was the answer. That with him, the storm inside her might finally quiet. That together, they could build a future untouched by betrayal, untouched by insecurity. But old habits die hard, and the cracks in her soul, they never truly healed. As their relationship deepened, Victoria's inner conflict only grew louder. She told herself she wanted stability, peace, a steady love. But beneath that surface, the fire still burned. The thrill-seeker inside her whispered for more. More excitement. More danger. More of the forbidden. She tried to silence it. She tried to mold herself into the woman Daniel believed she was. But every mask has a breaking point. Victoria Hayes was a woman at war with herself, the polished heiress on one side, the restless storm on the other. And in that war, in her refusal to choose, in her desperate attempt to have both worlds, lay the seeds of a tragedy that would devastate every life around her. Because when a mask finally cracks, it doesn't just shatter the person wearing it. It shatters everyone who loves them. If Victoria Hayes was raised in a palace of glass and pressure, Daniel Mercer grew up in a home built on warmth, simplicity, and unshakable values. His father, Dr. Thomas Mercer, was a small-town physician, known for treating patients even when they couldn't pay. His mother, Ellen, was a high school English teacher who spent evenings surrounded by books and the laughter of her students. They were not wealthy. They were not powerful. But what they gave their only son was far more precious: love without condition. For Daniel, childhood wasn't about appearances or status. It was about roots. He was the boy who disappeared into the woods with a notebook and a magnifying glass, cataloging bugs and plants with the wonder of a young explorer. Summers were spent camping, his nights lit by campfires and constellations. He learned to listen to the sound of the earth, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the flow of a nearby creek. Where Victoria's world was about perfection, Daniel's was about curiosity. Where her parents demanded results, his parents nurtured questions. And that difference shaped everything. By high school, Daniel had developed a sharp mind and an even sharper heart. He excelled in science, not for accolades, but for the thrill of discovery. Yet it wasn't just his intellect that stood out. It was his character. He was the student who stayed after class to tutor a struggling peer. The teenager who volunteered at the animal shelter without telling anyone. The young man who believed that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. People trusted Daniel because he was steady, dependable, honest to his core. And when he earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university, it felt like the world opening its arms to him. He chose environmental science, a field that perfectly mirrored his passion for protecting the fragile balance of life. It wasn't just a career. For Daniel, it was a calling. But Daniel's story wasn't written in isolation. There was another figure, always close by, his cousin, Adrian Mercer. Adrian and Daniel were opposites from the start. Adrian came from the wealthy branch of the family, privilege, luxury, indulgence. Daniel came from modest roots. But blood, as they say, runs thicker than water. As children, Daniel's calm steadiness was a lifeline for Adrian, who grew up in a household of neglect and chaos. Adrian admired Daniel, even envied him. And Daniel, in turn, believed he could help guide his cousin, keep him anchored. To Daniel, Adrian wasn't just family. He was a brother. How cruel fate would prove that the brotherhood Daniel cherished would one day be the blade that pierced his heart. Through his university years and beyond, Daniel's dedication to conservation carried him across the globe. Rainforests in peril, coastlines crumbling under human greed, wildlife hunted to extinction. He witnessed it all, and instead of turning bitter, his resolve grew stronger. The world needed saving, and Daniel Mercer intended to try. And then, one evening, fate placed her in his path. Victoria Hayes. He first saw her at a fundraising gala. The room was drenched in wealth, diamonds, tuxedos, champagne flowing like rivers. But amid the glitter, Daniel's eyes locked on her. She was stunning, yes, but beauty wasn't what froze him. It was something else, something raw. Beneath her polished surface, he saw loneliness. He saw fragility. He saw a woman who, despite her perfect smile, was silently begging to be understood. And Daniel was a man who couldn't turn away from someone in need. From that night, their lives became intertwined. Victoria was intrigued by him. Unlike the men she'd chased before, Daniel didn't flatter her with empty words. He didn't crumble under her tests or bow to her theatrics. He saw her, truly saw her, and that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. For Daniel, it felt simple. Here was a woman of beauty and brilliance who carried a hidden sadness. He believed he could be her anchor, her safety, her future. And for a time, he was. Their relationship blossomed into a whirlwind romance. To Victoria, Daniel represented stability she had never known. To Daniel, Victoria was the dream, someone to share his battles, his adventures, his life. It seemed inevitable that he would propose. It happened during a conservation trip to Costa Rica. On a secluded beach, under the fading glow of a sun melting into the horizon, Daniel knelt and offered her a ring. Not just any ring, an ethically sourced diamond, chosen not for its size, but for its meaning. It symbolized his love, his integrity, his commitment to a future built on values he held sacred. Victoria said yes, enthusiastically, and for Daniel Mercer, that moment was the pinnacle of his life. He had found his soulmate. He had found his forever. But what Daniel could not see, what he would not allow himself to imagine, was that beneath Victoria's radiant yes, her storm still raged, that the cracks in her soul had not healed, that the hunger for danger, for fire, for the forbidden had not died. Daniel Mercer, the steady dreamer, believed he was walking into a life of love and truth. Instead, he was walking blindfolded toward betrayal. Every family has its rebel, its misfit, its storm. For the Mercer clan, that storm had a name, Adrian Mercer. Born into the wealthy side of the family, Adrian's life was built on silk sheets, expensive toys, and limitless opportunity. But what he lacked, what money could never buy, was stability. His father, a high-powered corporate lawyer, was almost never home. His mother drowned her loneliness in cocktails, charity luncheons, and prescription pills. And so, Adrian was raised not by guiding hands, but by neglect. Left to his own devices, he learned quickly that charm could open doors, that good looks could disarm suspicion, and that rules existed only to be broken. As a boy, he was magnetic. Teachers adored him when he applied himself. Friends flocked to his side. Girls giggled in his presence. But there was always something darker beneath that charm. A recklessness. A hunger for danger. He cut classes, led pranks, lied with a smile, and manipulated with ease. Yet every time he fell too far, there was Daniel, his cousin, his opposite, his anchor. It was during one reckless summer that their bond truly formed. Adrian had dragged a group of friends into trouble, an abandoned construction site, broken windows, sirens in the distance. When everyone scattered, it was Daniel who stayed behind, who found Adrian trembling in the shadows, who offered him not judgment, but a hand. For perhaps the first time in his life, Adrian felt truly seen, truly valued. Not for his mischief, not for his Mercer name, but for who he was beneath the chaos. From that day on, Daniel became more than a cousin. He became a lifeline, a steady compass to a boy who otherwise spun wildly out of control. But compasses can be ignored, and lifelines can be severed. Adrian's path diverged as they grew older. Where Daniel pursued science with purpose, Adrian drifted aimlessly. He switched college majors like clothes, never settling, always restless. Eventually, he landed at a flashy startup tech firm, not because he loved the work, but because it bought him the lifestyle he craved. Expensive cars, rooftop parties, endless nights of indulgence. His personal life was no less chaotic. Relationships burned fast and ended in ashes. He craved validation, but every conquest left him emptier. Women adored him, but no one truly knew him. He was a charming rogue, a playboy with a smile that could melt steel, and a heart that never let anyone in for long. At least, not until her. The first time Adrian laid eyes on Victoria Hayes, she was standing beside Daniel. He had heard about her, of course, the heiress, the beauty, the perfect fiancée. But seeing her in person was different. Her wit matched his, her gaze was sharp, and beneath her elegance, he recognized something familiar. She was restless, just like him. Adrian was captivated instantly, and he hated himself for it. This was Daniel's future wife, the woman his cousin adored, the one person he should never look at twice. And yet, he couldn't help himself. At first, it was harmless. A joke here, a teasing remark, a glance that lingered a second too long. Harmless, he told himself. A little flirtation never hurt anyone. But the heart is treacherous, and forbidden fruit is the sweetest. Victoria, for her part, felt it too. In Adrian, she saw the very thing Daniel lacked: danger, spontaneity, fire. He was unpredictable, intoxicating, a reminder of the thrill she thought she had buried. And that thrill called to her. What began as stolen glances soon grew into something far more dangerous. Conversations carried an undercurrent of desire. Hands brushed and lingered. Secrets formed in silence. Adrian knew he should stop, that he owed Daniel his loyalty, that betraying his cousin was unthinkable. But temptation whispered louder. And Adrian Mercer had never been a man who resisted temptation. As the wedding day approached, Adrian's world turned into a battlefield. On one side, loyalty to Daniel, the cousin who had saved him, guided him, believed in him when no one else did. On the other, a burning, irresistible desire for Victoria, a woman who seemed to understand his restlessness, his hunger, his brokenness. He tried to bury it. He tried to laugh it off. But the more he tried, the deeper he fell. Adrian's charm grew reckless. His jokes became loaded. His eyes gave him away. Every time he looked at Victoria, he betrayed his cousin in silence. And the conflict inside him twisted him into someone unrecognizable, erratic, volatile, desperate. The truth is brutal. Adrian loved Daniel. He admired him. He wanted his approval. But he wanted Victoria more. What started as a harmless spark had become a fire, and Adrian was powerless to put it out. He was playing with a bomb, and the countdown had already begun. Because some betrayals don't stay hidden forever. Some passions, once unleashed, demand destruction. And Adrian Mercer, the black sheep, the reckless charmer, the cousin who couldn't resist the forbidden, was about to set in motion a tragedy that would stain the Mercer family forever. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the universe had finally aligned. Daniel Mercer had proposed to Victoria Hayes on a moonlit beach in Costa Rica, a ring ethically sourced, symbolizing not just love, but his deepest values. She said yes without hesitation. The waves applauded their future. The stars bore witness to a promise of forever. To outsiders, it was perfect. The engagement of the season, the union of wealth and virtue. The Hayes name, bound to the Mercers, what could possibly go wrong? But perfection is fragile. And beneath the polished surface, the cracks were already spreading. From the very start of planning, the differences between Daniel and Victoria clashed like thunder. Daniel wanted intimacy, a small gathering in nature, vows spoken under the open sky, a day that reflected simplicity and sincerity. But Victoria? She wanted grandeur. A ballroom glowing with chandeliers, hundreds of guests whispering in awe, a celebration that would remind everyone that the Hayes family still reigned supreme. Each compromise felt one-sided. Each argument left bruises invisible to the eye. Daniel yielded again and again, convincing himself that love meant sacrifice. If this is what she dreams of, I will give it to her, he told himself. Victoria, meanwhile, interpreted his hesitations as something darker, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of devotion. What should have been the happiest months of their lives became a slow erosion of trust. And in that erosion, Adrian Mercer found his opening. He was everywhere now, joking with Daniel, comforting Victoria, inserting himself into the chaos of wedding preparations as if he belonged at the very center of it all. He had a way of making tension dissolve, at least on the surface. A witty remark here, a playful smirk there, and the stress of floral arrangements or guest lists seemed to fade. Daniel welcomed it. He was grateful his cousin was there to help. He never suspected the shadows lurking behind Adrian's charm. But Victoria? Oh, she noticed. Every time Adrian walked into the room, her heart betrayed her. She felt it quicken, a rush of fire spreading through her veins. His eyes lingered a fraction too long. His hand brushed hers and didn't move away quickly enough. And she didn't stop him. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Harmless. A distraction from the suffocating weight of wedding stress. Surely every bride-to-be feels restless before taking such a monumental step? Surely a little spark with her fiancé's cousin didn't mean anything? But deep down, she knew. She knew she was inching closer to a line that once crossed could never be erased. The breaking point came late one night. Daniel and Victoria had fought bitterly over seating arrangements, a ridiculous argument, yet one that left them both in shambles. Daniel stormed out, slamming the door behind him. And who was there, as if by fate, with a bottle of champagne and a sympathetic ear? Adrian. Victoria poured out her frustrations, her fears, her doubts. And Adrian listened, not as Daniel did, calm, logical, reassuring, but with fire, with understanding, with the reckless passion that mirrored her own. The line blurred. A touch lingered. A glance deepened. And then, In a moment of weakness that would ignite a tragedy, their lips met. A kiss. Just a kiss. But it was enough to change everything. The next morning, guilt consumed her. She told herself it was a mistake, a lapse of judgment, one that would never happen again. What Daniel doesn't know won't hurt him, she whispered as she stared at herself in the mirror. But guilt is a liar. Because once that door was opened, there was no shutting it again. Adrian became her secret escape. The man who reminded her of the thrill she craved, the fire she couldn't extinguish. Their meetings grew bolder. What began as stolen moments turned into clandestine plans. A wedding gift shopping trip that ended in a hotel room. An afternoon errand that led to Adrian's apartment. The thrill was intoxicating. The danger addictive. Victoria told herself she was still in control. That she could marry Daniel and keep her secret locked away. That this was her last taste of fire before a lifetime of calm. But the truth? The fire was already spreading. And it was burning through everything. Her loyalty, her vows, her very soul. Daniel, ever trusting, ever blind, had no idea. He still believed he was building a life with the woman of his dreams. He still smiled at Adrian, grateful for his cousin's support. He still looked at Victoria with love in his eyes, never imagining the betrayal happening in the shadows. But shadows cannot stay hidden forever. And with each passing day, each whispered lie, each stolen kiss, the time bomb ticked louder. The engagement of Victoria Hayes and Daniel Mercer was celebrated as a union of love and promise. But behind closed doors, it was already poisoned. Because when love is built on lies, the foundation will always crumble. And when that foundation crumbled, it would not just collapse. It would explode. What began as a single kiss, a fleeting moment of weakness, soon spiraled into something far more dangerous. Victoria Hayes and Adrian Mercer had crossed the line. And once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. At first, she tried to convince herself it was nothing. Just one mistake. One slip. But the hunger inside her laughed at the lie. The fire had been rekindled. The very fire she had been trying to smother for years. And now it burned hotter than ever. Adrian, too, told himself he could stop. That loyalty to Daniel mattered more than desire. But every time he saw Victoria, every time her eyes met his, resistance collapsed like sand against a crashing wave. And so, the affair began. They became masters of deception. A text about flower arrangements meant a secret rendezvous. A call about tuxedo fittings meant a night at Adrian's apartment. An errand for wedding gifts was nothing more than a disguise for passion. They crafted codes, excuses, elaborate alibis. Victoria would leave Daniel's side under the pretense of responsibility, only to fall into Adrian's arms hours later. Hotel lobbies became gateways to hidden rooms. Her office, once a place of art and history, became a stage for forbidden encounters. Even Adrian's car, parked in dark corners of the city, became a sanctuary for their recklessness. Every meeting carried risk. Every stolen moment, a chance of exposure. And that risk, that danger, only made it sweeter. But with passion came close calls. One evening, during a family dinner, Victoria and Adrian slipped away, telling themselves they'd only steal a brief kiss. In the shadows of the coat closet, their lips met, their bodies pressed close, until footsteps echoed nearby. It was Daniel. He passed so close, his voice clear as he called for Adrian. Heartbeats thundered. They froze, breathless. Had he noticed? Did he know? Somehow he walked away. And with it, their secret lived another day. Another time, a friend of Victoria's spotted them in a cafe across town, their hands entwined across the table. In a panic, Victoria laughed it off, spinning a lie about planning a surprise for Daniel. The friend smiled, but her eyes lingered, suspicious, questioning. It was too close. Far too close. Yet even then, they didn't stop. They couldn't. The deeper they sank, the more Victoria compared. Daniel was steady, dependable, safe. He gave her love, yes, but it was calm, predictable, like a steady flame in a lantern. Adrian, on the other hand, was wildfire. Spontaneous, dangerous, consuming. He thrilled her, challenged her, made her feel alive in ways Daniel never could. And in her darkest moments, Victoria began to wonder, had she chosen the wrong man? Adrian certainly thought so. At first, he had told himself this was nothing more than a conquest, another forbidden thrill, another story in a long line of affairs. But Victoria was different. With her, the game became something real. He began to imagine a future with her. A life not hidden in shadows, but open, free. The cost of that future, Daniel's heart, Daniel's trust, Daniel's very life, was a detail he conveniently ignored. And yet, in quieter moments, both of them felt the crushing weight of guilt. Victoria would lie awake at night beside Daniel, his arm draped protectively around her, while her heart pounded with shame. She told herself she loved him, that she still wanted the life they were building. But how could she, when she was sneaking away into his cousin's arms? Adrian, too, wrestled with the truth. Every time he saw Daniel smile, every time his cousin thanked him for being there, it cut him like a knife. He was betraying the man who had been his anchor, his brother in all but blood. And still they could not stop. The wedding day loomed closer, and with it, the pressure grew unbearable. Their secret was no longer just an affair. It was a ticking time bomb. Every look risked exposure. Every lie piled higher. Every promise they whispered to each other in stolen hours was another step toward the inevitable explosion. Because no affair stays hidden forever. No lie remains unbroken. And while Victoria and Adrian clung desperately to their fantasy, the fantasy of fire, of love, of something worth destroying everything for, reality was marching toward them with brutal inevitability. Daniel Mercer, steady and kind, prided himself on his intuition. He had always been able to read people, to see truth where others could not. In his conservation work, it had saved him time and time again. But when it came to the betrayal festering right under his nose, Daniel was blind. Or perhaps he refused to see. The first signs were subtle. Victoria's sudden obsession with her phone. The way she ended calls abruptly when he entered the room. Her irritability, easily dismissed as wedding stress. The unfamiliar cologne clinging to her clothes, brushed off as a co-worker's. It was Adrian's behavior, however, that finally stirred suspicion. His cousin, once so eager to spend time with him, now made excuses to avoid gatherings. When he did appear, there was a nervous energy about him. Eyes that flickered too quickly, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Daniel tried to silence the doubts. He told himself he was being paranoid. But the truth is, his gut already knew. The storm was building, and soon it would break. Daniel Mercer had always trusted his instincts. In the wild, on conservation trips, his intuition saved him more than once, spotting danger before it struck, sensing shifts in weather, reading subtle signs in nature. But in his own life, in his own home, his instincts betrayed him. Or perhaps, he betrayed himself by refusing to see what was already in front of him. The first cracks appeared as whispers of doubt. Small things, easy to dismiss. Victoria's sudden attachment to her phone. The way she would angle the screen away when he walked in. Calls ended abruptly. Laughter silenced the moment he entered the room. She blamed wedding stress, errands, exhaustion. Then came the excuses. I'm working late. I'm shopping for the wedding. I need some time with the planner. Every absence explained, every explanation polished. And Daniel wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But belief comes at a cost. The nagging doubt grew louder. It was the faint trace of cologne he didn't own, lingering on her clothes. The nervous glance she gave when he asked simple questions. And most of all, Adrian, Daniel's cousin, usually carefree, had grown tense, withdrawn. He dodged family dinners, avoided eye contact, stumbled over excuses. And when Adrian was around, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something unspoken lingered between him and Victoria. A joke only they understood. A glance that lasted too long. Daniel tried to laugh it off. I'm imagining things. I'm stressed. It's the wedding, that's all. But deep inside, the truth twisted like a blade. And so, he did what he had never imagined himself capable of. He became a man obsessed. When Victoria showered, Daniel checked her phone. Messages deleted, threads cut short, silence where conversation should have been. He pored over credit card statements, noting champagne purchases on nights she claimed to work late. He drove by Adrian's apartment at odd hours, his chest tightening when he saw Victoria's car parked outside. Each piece of evidence was another dagger. Each discovery another weight crushing his chest. The kind man, the steady man, the dreamer who built his life on love and trust. Now he was unraveling. Consumed by paranoia, by grief, by the unbearable fear that everything he believed in was a lie. 2 weeks before the wedding, The dam finally broke. Daniel couldn't carry the silence anymore. The questions clawed at him. The doubts screamed too loudly. One evening, as Victoria flipped through fabric swatches at the dining table, he sat down across from her. His hands trembled, his voice tight. "Victoria," he said, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard. "Tell me the truth. What's going on between you and Adrian?" The room froze. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then, like the practiced daughter of privilege she had always been, Victoria slipped on her mask. She scoffed, forced a laugh, called him paranoid. "Adrian? Really, Daniel? You're imagining things." But Daniel pressed on. He laid out the evidence, the secretive calls, the unexplained absences, the hotel receipts. His voice cracked as he spoke, the words tasting like betrayal on his tongue. And Victoria? She denied it all. Calm at first, then defensive, then angry. "You're overreacting. This is wedding stress. Why would I ever betray you?" Then, she did something that chilled him to his core. She suggested calling Adrian. Right there, right then, to clear everything up. Daniel watched her hands shake ever so slightly as she dialed. The call went on speaker. Adrian's voice filled the room, smooth, steady. He backed every story, every excuse, every alibi. Together, they presented a united front so seamless, so carefully coordinated, that Daniel almost doubted himself. Almost. But deep down he knew. By the end of that night, Daniel sat in silence, shattered. The trust that once defined him had collapsed. He looked into Victoria's eyes, searching for something. Remorse, honesty, love. But all he found was a stranger. And in that moment, the man who had built his life on kindness, on loyalty, on love, felt the ground beneath him crumble. The future he had envisioned, gone. The life he thought he was building, a mirage. And though the wedding day still loomed, Daniel Mercer knew the truth. Nothing would ever be the same again. Because betrayal, once seen, can never be unseen. And the storm was only beginning. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the heavens themselves had blessed the union of Daniel Mercer and Victoria Hayes. The Rosewood estate shimmered in the sunlight, its gardens trimmed to perfection, its grand ballroom transformed into a floral wonderland of white roses and baby's breath. To the guests arriving in polished cars, it looked like a scene from a fairy tale. But behind the gilded doors, the truth was anything but enchanting. In the bridal suite, Victoria sat before an ornate mirror, draped in lace and silk. Her bridesmaids fluttered around her like butterflies, adjusting curls, perfecting makeup, fastening jewels. Yet no amount of powder or pearls could disguise the pallor of her face, the tremor of her hands. Beneath the veil, her eyes were hollow, eyes that carried the weight of lies. Every glance in the mirror whispered her secret. Every brushstroke on her lips reminded her of Adrian's kiss. The gown that once symbolized purity now felt like a shroud. Across the estate, in a quieter room, Daniel stood before another mirror. His best man adjusted his bow tie, but Daniel's face remained unreadable. He looked calm, composed, but inside he was a man on the brink. The decision he had made in the dark hours of the morning weighed heavy on his heart. He would not go through with the lie. He could not stand at the altar and pretend. And then Adrian entered, late, as always, slipping in with a half-smile that failed to mask his nerves. His eyes darted quickly toward Daniel before looking away. Daniel caught it, that flash of guilt, of fear. For a moment, the room thickened with tension. The two cousins, once as close as brothers, now stood as silent adversaries. Guests began to arrive, filling the estate with laughter, champagne flutes, and hushed anticipation. A string quartet played soft melodies, unaware of the storm about to erupt. Families mingled, photographers captured perfect smiles, and whispers of what a beautiful couple floated through the air. Inside, however, 3 hearts raced, one with dread, one with fear, one with fury. The wedding planner's voice echoed down the hall. It's time. The grand ballroom glowed as sunlight poured through towering windows. The scent of roses filled the air. All eyes turned to the altar, where Daniel stood waiting, tall and solemn, his expression a mask. Beside him, Adrian shifted uncomfortably, beads of sweat forming at his temple. Then, the music swelled. The doors opened, and there she was, Victoria Hayes, radiant in white, gliding down the aisle on her father's arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She was breathtaking, a vision of perfection. But to those who knew her best, there was something off. The smile too strained. The bouquet clutched too tightly, the slightest tremor in her step. Her eyes met Daniel's. In that instant, time froze. She saw it. The coldness. The certainty. And her blood ran cold. The officiant began the ceremony. Words of love, of unity, of forever. Words that washed over the couple like static. Victoria's responses came faint, automatic. Her voice a ghost of what it should have been. Daniel's voice, in contrast, was clear, steady, but stripped of warmth. When the moment came for vows, the atmosphere shifted. Guests leaned forward, waiting for the promises of love and devotion. But instead, Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes locked on Victoria, and his voice rang out, strong, unwavering. "Victoria," he began, "I stand here today not to recite vows of love and fidelity, but to speak a truth that can no longer be ignored." The room fell silent. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Victoria's eyes widened in horror. Adrian turned pale. "For weeks," Daniel continued, his voice edged with pain, "I have suspected that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I was ready to spend my life with, has been living a lie." Murmurs erupted. Families shifted uncomfortably. The officiant froze, unsure whether to intervene. And not just any lie. Daniel's voice grew stronger, fueled by betrayal, but one that cuts to the heart of love and family. "Victoria, you have been having an affair with my cousin, the man I trusted to stand beside me today as my best man." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stood frozen, her bouquet slipping from her trembling hands, crashing softly to the floor. Adrian took a step back, as if distance could erase the accusation. The guests erupted in gasps, whispers, disbelief. "I have proof," Daniel said, his voice breaking slightly. "Emails, texts, hotel receipts. While I was building a future, the two of you were destroying it." Chaos ensued. Victoria's mother wailed. Her father surged to his feet in rage. Daniel's parents sat stricken, eyes darting between their son and their nephew. Guests exchanged shocked glances, whispering like wildfire through the room. Victoria finally found her voice, her words tumbling out in panic. She pleaded with Daniel, insisting it wasn't what he thought, that he had misunderstood. But her voice cracked, her eyes betrayed her, her excuses crumbled. Daniel lifted his gaze to the stunned audience. "I am sorry," he said solemnly. "Sorry that you all came here under false pretenses. This wedding is over." And with that, he stepped down from the altar. His footsteps echoed through the hall as he walked alone down the aisle. But before he reached the doors, he paused. He turned to Adrian, his voice low but heavy with pain. "You weren't just my cousin. You were my brother. And you destroyed me." The words hung in the air, searing, final. Then Daniel continued toward the exit, while the ballroom descended into chaos. Families shouting, guests in disbelief, Victoria collapsing in sobs, Adrian standing pale and frozen. The fairy tale had shattered. The mask had fallen, and the nightmare had only just begun. For a heartbeat, the ballroom held its breath. Daniel's words still hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's bouquet lay abandoned on the marble floor. Adrian stood stone still beside the altar, his face drained of color, his eyes wide and glassy with panic. Then came the movement, small, furtive, unmistakable. Adrian's hand slid inside his jacket. "Adrian, no!" Victoria cried, her voice cracking through the murmur of the crowd. A flash of metal. Gasps. A chorus of chairs scraping as guests lurched to their feet. The string quartet stumbled backward, bows clattering, music dying in a tangle of discordant notes. Adrian pulled a handgun free. It looked impossibly bright in the wash of sun from the tall windows. His hand shook. His chest heaved. He lifted the barrel, and in an instant, the fairy tale dissolved into terror. Screams tore through the room. Some guests dove behind chairs, others bolted for the doors. "Call 911, someone shouted. Glasses toppled, champagne spilled like shattered light across the floor. The scent of roses turned sharp and wrong, drowned by the surge of fear. Daniel spun around, disbelief carving deep lines into his face. "Adrian, look at me," he said, voice steady but urgent. "Put it down. This isn't you." Adrian's eyes blazed. You took everything, he snarled, the gun wavering between Daniel and the chaotic room. You don't get to walk away, like I'm nothing, like she never. Stop. Victoria stepped forward, her veil trembling, her hands outstretched. Adrian, please, this is madness. He flinched at her voice, jaw tightening. I wasn't supposed to lose you, he choked. Not like this. Not to him again. The last word curdled into a bitter laugh. The saint. The hero. Daniel always wins. Adrian, Daniel said softly, inching closer, palms open. Winning? This isn't a game. It's our lives. I loved you like a brother. God, I still do. Don't throw everything away. You can still walk out of here alive. Adrian's gaze flicked to Daniel's hands, to Victoria's tear-streaked face, to the stunned congregation. His arm quivered. For a second, one fragile, golden second, the barrel dipped. Please, Victoria whispered. We can fix the rest. We can't fix this. A tremor ran through Adrian. I can't go back, he said. Not after today. Not after what I did. His eyes glistened with a desperate grief. There's no life waiting for me. Only judgment. You're wrong, Daniel said. There's always a road back. Not for me, Adrian murmured. The gun rose again. No, Daniel lunged, and in the same breath Victoria moved too. An instinct, a prayer, a final attempt to wrench the future off its rails. What followed happened in a blur, and yet with the cruel clarity that only tragedy can conjure. A crack, deafening, merciless, ripped through the air. Silence slammed down. For an instant, no one breathed. Then reality rushed back in a flood. A child's shriek, the clatter of a fallen chair, the ragged cry of a mother. And at the center of it all, Victoria staggered. Her hand flew to her chest. She looked almost surprised, as though the universe had played a trick too bitter to comprehend. A bloom of crimson spread across the white silk of her gown, bright as a wound in the world. Oh God, Daniel breathed, catching her as her knees buckled. Victoria, stay with me. Stay with me. He lowered her gently to the floor, cradling her head. The veil fanned across the marble like frost. Around them, chaos churned, people sobbing, others yelling into phones, a few guests with medical training rushing forward, barking calm instructions through the panic. Pressure here, someone said. Keep pressure here. Daniel pressed his hands to the wound, voice breaking. You're okay. You're okay. Look at me. I'm right here. His tears fell hot and helpless onto her veil. I forgive you, he whispered, words tumbling out like a vow. Do you hear me? I forgive you. Please stay. Her eyes fluttered, finding his. The old warmth flickered, fragile but real. I'm so sorry, she rasped, breath hitching. Daniel. A cough seized her, thin and sharp, and a line of red touched her lip. I never meant. Don't talk, he begged, shaking his head. Save your breath. Her fingers searched for his, trembling, and he laced them with his own. For a cruel moment, the world narrowed to two people on a floor of marble and flowers, to a love ravaged but not erased. Behind them, Adrian stood frozen, the gun slack in his hand. His face was ashen, terror chiseled into every line. The weapon slipped, clattering against the stone with a sound that made the nearest guests flinch. He stared at Victoria, then at his cousin, then at the blood, unable to reconcile what his rage had invited into the room. What have I done? He whispered, the words hoarse and wild. What have I? Two men surged forward, Daniel's father and a guest built like a linebacker, pinning Adrian's arms, dragging him back from the scene. He didn't fight. He collapsed inward, eyes stunned and unfocused, as if his own body had become a prison he could not escape. Sirens wailed in the distance, thin, rising, coming closer. Time warped into strange increments, the second hand thudding like a hammer, the curve of sunlight sliding across the floor, the pulse beneath Victoria's wrist beating, then faltering, then beating again. Hold on, Daniel begged, pressing harder, his hands stained crimson. Hold on, my God, please. A paramedic team burst through the doors. Clear a path, someone shouted. The crowd parted, a river opening around a rock. In practiced motions, the medics took over, gauze, pressure, monitors, a flurry of clipped commands. Daniel moved when they told him to and refused to move when they didn't. He hovered at Victoria's shoulder, refusing to break the thread between them. The lead medic met his eyes, calm, focused, controlled. We're doing everything we can. Is she? He couldn't finish. He couldn't make his mouth shape the word. Stay with her, the medic said. Talk to her. Keep her awake. He nodded, leaning so close his breath stirred her hair. Victoria, he whispered. I'm here. Remember the beach? The wind that night? You said the waves sounded like applause. He swallowed hard. Keep listening. Keep breathing. Stay with me. Her eyes opened a fraction, gathering him in. Tears pooled, shimmering like glass. She fought for air. I loved parts of you I never deserved. You don't have to deserve love, he said, voice breaking. You just have to be alive to receive it. Please, be alive. The monitors hissed and clicked. The medics traded quiet, urgent phrases. The air tasted of metal and fear. The scent of roses had become an ache. At the room's edge, police officers arrived, conferring with staff, moving swiftly toward Adrian. He lifted his wrists without being asked, as if shackles were the only logical outcome. His eyes never left the spot where Victoria lay. Guilt, pure, scalding, poured off him in waves. I wanted to stop, he said to no one and everyone. His voice broke. I wanted her to choose me. A young officer guided him away. Sir, we need you to come with us. Adrian nodded, a hollow gesture, an echo inside an echo. Back at the center of the storm, a medic pressed 2 fingers to Victoria's neck, searching, counting. Another watched the monitor, jaw tight. Stay with us, she urged. Stay with us, sweetheart. Victoria's gaze drifted to Daniel's, soft as a closing door. She squeezed his hand, a tiny pressure he felt like a thunderclap. The word frayed. I'm sorry. I know, he whispered, forehead to hers. I know. Her breath thinned. The room hushed, as if the entire world leaned in to listen. A long second, then another. Please, Daniel said, voice raw. Please. The medic's eyes lifted, kind, stricken, honest. She shook her head once. No, Daniel whispered, as if the single syllable might reverse time, might stitch the day back together. No. The monitor fell into a terrible, steady line. Somewhere in the rafters, the last note of the quartet's abandoned song seemed to hang, a ghost of grace in a room that had forgotten how to hold beauty. On a floor strewn with flowers and glass, in a gown meant for a lifetime of memories, Victoria Hayes lay still. And Daniel Mercer, the man who had come to this room to promise forever, held her as if sheer love could defy the end. He rocked gently, whispering her name, while outside the windows the sun kept shining as though the world had not changed forever. The sirens faded. The roses dulled. The ballroom, once a cathedral of promise, became a crime scene. And the story that began as a celebration ended with a single, shattering truth. One gunshot can end a life, and echo through every life it touches. The grand ballroom of Rosewood Estate no longer smelled of roses. Hours after the gunshot, the flowers still lined the walls, but their sweetness was drowned by the metallic sting of blood and the sharp tang of disinfectant. What had been a cathedral of love was now a crime scene. Guests gave statements to police with trembling voices. Chairs lay overturned, glasses shattered, a violin string snapped clean through. But the most haunting sight of all was the gown. Victoria Hayes's wedding dress, once pristine, now marred by crimson. It remained in everyone's memory long after the paramedics wheeled her lifeless body away. The news spread like wildfire. The wedding of the season turned into tragedy. Headlines screamed betrayal, murder, heartbreak. Reporters circled the estate, their cameras capturing the shattered faces of guests as they left. The Hayes family, pillars of high society, collapsed under the weight of shame and sorrow. Evelyn Hayes, so obsessed with appearances, refused to leave her room for weeks. Charles, furious and broken, lashed out at anyone who dared speak Adrian's name. The Mercer family suffered differently. Daniel's parents, devastated for their son, wrestled with the impossible grief of losing not just Victoria, but Adrian as well. One child murdered, the other condemned. The family bond, once strong, was split forever. Adrian Mercer was arrested without resistance. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't beg for mercy. At the station, he sat in silence, eyes vacant, replaying the moment over and over again. The flash, the scream, the blood. He confessed to everything. There was no plea deal, no twisted defense. Only guilt. At trial, the courtroom listened as witnesses described the chaos of the wedding day. Guests recounted screams, the sight of the gun, the sound of the single fatal shot. The prosecution painted Adrian as a jealous man consumed by rage and betrayal. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, a mind unraveling under pressure. But the jury was unmoved. The evidence was clear, the tragedy undeniable. Adrian Mercer was found guilty of second-degree murder. His sentence, life in prison. And so, the black sheep of the Mercer family, the cousin who once looked to Daniel as a brother, spent his days behind bars, his charm and charisma reduced to whispers in the prison yard, his life defined not by mischief or indulgence, but by the shadow of a single, irreversible act. And what of Daniel? The man who had once dreamed of saving the world now found himself unable to save the one person he had loved most. In the weeks after Victoria's death, he moved like a ghost. He left his job, his apartment, the city itself. He returned to the wilderness, the forests, the mountains, the quiet rivers, searching for solace in the places that had once given him peace. But even the beauty of nature could not wash away the image of her blood, the sound of her final breath, the weight of her hand slipping from his. Friends tried to reach him. Family begged him to come home. But Daniel drifted further away, carrying his grief into the most remote corners of the world. Some said he went mad with sorrow, living among the trees like a hermit. Others believed he found some kind of healing in the solitude. But one thing was certain, Daniel Mercer was never the same. The laughter that once came so easily vanished. The optimism that had defined him was gone. He remained, but the man who stood at the altar that day, that man had died with Victoria. The tragedy of Rosewood Estate left scars on everyone who was there. Guests spoke of it for years in hushed tones, as though speaking too loudly might summon the ghosts back. The sight of a wedding dress was never the same for them. And for the two families, the Hayes and the Mercers, nothing could ever bridge the gulf. Two legacies, once joined in celebration, forever divided by blood. Some tragedies fade with time, dissolving into memory. But others remain etched into the soul, impossible to forget. This was one of those tragedies. A wedding meant to unite two lives had destroyed three. A love built on lies had ended in death. And a family bond, once unshakable, was shattered beyond repair. Adrian Mercer lived out his punishment in a cell. Daniel wandered the earth, broken and alone. Victoria Hayes rested in the cold silence of the grave. 3 lives, 3 fates, all tied together by betrayal, obsession, and a single shot that echoed long after the music had stopped.